Hello, everybody, and welcome to Books in Hindsight. I am your host, author Matthew Hines. Today we have an amazing show. We have author and psychic Marjorie Young. She is the author of The Boy with Golden Eyes, a 6-books series that has had fabulous acclaim and awards on the literary front. So it's going to be an amazing show, and Marjorie is an amazing guest with a lot of amazing stories to tell. So before we can bring her out, we need to take care of some business. We want to thank all of our new subscribers. We want to remind you, we don't monetize, we don't commercialize. We rely on you, our listening public, for our well-being. So we'd like you to consider a sponsorship, $3, $5, or $10 a month on Patreon. Go to Heinessight.com and buy one of my great books, and go to booksinhindsight.com and click on any of the affiliate links of our authors and pick out one or two or all of their great books. All right, then. With that being said, and knowing that you've hit that subscribe button, let's bring out Marjorie Young. Let's go to the phones.
Welcome to Books in Hindsight, the only podcast where hindsight is always 2020. And we explore the great books, works, and ideas of the century. Now, here's your host, teacher, and author, Matthew Hines.
That would be helpful. It says recording.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Books in Hindsight. As I promised you, I have another amazing author. I have Marjorie Young, and she is the author of The Boy with Golden Eyes. Now, this is not only a fictional book, but it also comes with an interesting backstory, and it is a 6-part series. So based on the awards that she's won and by the public accolades, this is a book that you just pick up and you want to keep on reading until you're finished with book 6. So let's not waste any more time. Let's bring out Marjorie Young. Marjorie Young, welcome to Books in Hindsight.
Hi, Matt. Thanks so much for having me.
All right, you're looking especially lovely today. I just have to ask you, we're in Seattle, so how are you bearing up under the weather?
Oh, I love the snow, actually. Although it got pretty icy after a while, it was hard to go out and get very far. But it was a wonderful experience. There were people skiing in my neighborhood when I went out for a walk, so that was great. And I love the snow, so no complaints here.
Yeah, and I have to ask you, I mean, you, like myself, you're a longtime Seattle resident, and are any concerns about why is it snowing so much?
I don't know. I heard it was the snowiest February in 70 years. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if this is some bizarre effect of global warming or just the way it works this winter, because some winters there's no snow. And then I'm very dissatisfied. I'm waiting for the snow to fall. And we really got a lot this time. So, I'm a psychic, but I don't know too much about reading the weather, coming weather forecasts. So, and by the way, I'm not wearing sunglasses because it's so sunny today. Just to let you know, I am very camera phobic. Since childhood, I've never liked having my picture taken and so on. So I'm a little bit covered up. I'm not in the witness protection program, so don't worry about that. But
well, I don't know. We've had some guests on here lately, Marjorie, where we might have to check. But I believe you. The only thing is we are at a loss because we're missing out on that beauty that you are covering up. So,
oh, well, sometimes it's good to guess at something than to know the actuality.
yeah,
So,
you have a definite point there. But
yeah, touch of mystery is always good.
But you look great anyway, and we're just so happy to have you on the podcast now. Marjorie, we're going to talk. Let's get this out of the way. First of all, let's talk about the titles of your books. And if you want to follow along and check out Marjorie's website, then you can go to let me say that again, theboywithgoldeneyes.com. And the names of Marjorie's books are, the first book is The Boy with Golden Eyes. The second book is The Prophetic Journey. The third is The Fate of Raja Jiran. The fourth is The Prophet of Doom. The fifth is Riddles and
Revelations.
And I wrote that down. What is that, Marjorie?
Revelations.
My writing, I wrote it down in such a hurry. And the last one is The Tainted Throne. All right, Marjorie. So let's talk a little bit about. You're also a psychic. So we know what an author is. Can you tell us about your psychic experience first?
Oh, gee. Well, I've had psychic abilities since earliest childhood. And of course, I didn't quite understand it. And I couldn't really freely talk about it very much growing up. Although I did do some things, for example, with my brothers, we would play card games. And sometimes I would tell them before they pick a card what the next card was going to be. Or I could read the cards that they were holding in their hands, which is one reason I don't like gambling, because I'd be sort of cheating. And I had a lot of precognition, knowing about something before it actually occurred. And as a child, they were often rather scary things. So as I get older, I didn't want to have anything to do with the whole process, but I could never stifle my abilities. And years later, in my early 20s, in fact, when I was studying martial arts in Japan, actually, is when they really started to run amok. So I had to get some help and advice, and I worked with scientists both in Japan and in the United States. They tested and verified my abilities. But the best thing is eventually I learned how to turn it on and turn it off. That was a huge breakthrough. So I could be in public and not be picking up on everyone's thoughts or physical symptoms or whatever, which is an invasion of their privacy and none of my business, and I don't want to know about it anyway. So these days, when I do readings, because I psychic, medium, clairvoyant, and healer, when I'm with a client, my abilities turn on. I meditate beforehand and get ready. And then when they walk out the door, I can turn it off and go back to whatever I was doing. So that was wonderful. But how these abilities came to, I know my mother had some similar abilities, but she didn't like to talk about it. I have a feeling from doing readings, these things tend to run in families. But, I can't necessarily account for it. Maybe it's some past life issues that are coming forward, but I love doing it. It's not scary to me at all now.
So, Marjorie, there's a level and there's a degree of ability, right? I mean, not everybody has the same kind of ability, but if you've actually, because people say that, they're psychic, Madam Wanda, but you've been actually verified. And
yes, I have been. They were able to test my ability in various ways.
And so that's really an odd coincidence because the prior podcast we were talking about is I had a remote viewer from the Army, their secret psychic program, and your character in your book is also a remote viewer. So I don't want to go into remote viewing and, when you deal with these people and you say the word psychic, then the bristles go up and all that. So I just want to make it clear to everybody that we're talking about two completely different things here. So your level of psychic ability is very extended, right? And so how did that affect your desire to become an author?
it wasn't a direct effect. The Boy with Golden Eyes, I had done some writing in earlier years, but I hadn't done any for a long time. The Boy with Golden Eyes came about almost as a lark, because my nephew Michael's son Sam and he was about 6 or 7 at the time, we were very close, and he and his family were in Seattle for the summer, and they'd moved back to New York for the rest of the year. And one summer when we were saying goodbye, Sam got very upset because he would miss me. And recently, right before that, I had told him a bedtime story. I'd made one up, and he loved it. So I said, well, Sam, don't get upset. While you're back in New York, I'm going to write you a story, and I'll email it to your dad, and he'll read it to you. So that perked him up a little bit. And then a month or so later, I realized, gee, I haven't started the story yet. I better get going. And one night while I was trying to sleep, it just came to me that there was a boy living isolated from the world, deep in the forest, with his strange grandparents, and he had golden eyes. That's all I knew. But the next morning, I just sat down to write the first chapter, and it all came to me. And by the end of chapter 1, the whole thing is set up. But it came as a complete surprise to me, because I had no idea what was going to unfold. And I thought that was very interesting. And I emailed it to Sam's dad. He read it. Sam loved it. So I continued with the writing and emailed each chapter as I went on. And eventually other people heard about it. So I was sending multiple people chapters, and they all were enthusiastic. So they said, you should try to publish it. And eventually I did. And on a whim, I entered book 1 into a contest and the Los Angeles Book Festival. And I won the best young adult novel. So I was completely shocked and amazed. But I went on with the writing from there. But I was writing just for the bliss of it. And Sam loved it. And it was basically a bedtime story for him that just took on a life of its own.
Well, Marjorie, congratulations on your success and on your award. And so, we talked about you have the psychic ability. And is there a possibility, let's talk about this character, Rupert. Is there a possibility that this is a real person that you're looking in on their life? Or is this just also so obviously a story, it couldn't really be a real person based on the time or something else?
Well, this is more or less in the Middle Ages. It starts out, and it goes over many countries and so on. But I never thought of it as a real person, other than Sam himself is an amazing kid. Now he's in university, but he's brilliant. He's very curious about the world. He's very good looking. And so I was using Rupert as modeled on Sam to some extent. As time went on, Rupert really started to develop more and more spiritual energies, psychic energies. So I was channeling myself, I guess, and Sam, plus Rupert was his own person. So it's kind of a combination, but it wasn't modeled on some person from history or something like that. But all the characters to me, I guess they must be extensions of myself since I'm creating them, but they all seem to have a very independent existence. Later on in the story, there's a character that Rupert thinks of as his grandmother. She's really not. But anyway, she's very psychic and very clear and very cryptic and doesn't like to share too much of information. And the is in her, in Shomila too. So my psychic abilities do definitely influence the plot and the storyline and some of the characters as well. But I never know what's going to happen from page to page, from paragraph to paragraph. I have no idea, which makes it a very entertaining way to write, because I'm in suspense. I'm wondering, how the heck are they going to get out of this? And then suddenly the answer's there and it just flows. So.
Okay, so then there's 2 things that we need to talk about. And the first one is, because when we're talking about a remote viewing or psychic, you're looking at something, or that actually exists in time. Otherwise, it's imagination. but you're pretty sure you're not looking at somebody else's life. So are you telling us that you're basically downloading these books from somewhere else through your psychic ability?
No, I don't feel like another entity is writing it, sort of thing. I think but there is something coming through me that brings me the inspiration. So it's a little hard to describe, but I'm not channeling the book from my spirit master George or something like that. This is coming through me. But a lot of my own psychic or spiritual experiences are in the book, but they're in disguise a little bit. So you can read this. And by the way, this is for readers of all ages, from as young as 6 or 7, they'd have to have it read to them. And the oldest people I know, my oldest fan, 92, that I've heard from. And many adults read it, get to look at it to give it to their kids, and they get so hooked, they finish reading it before they'll give it to their kids. So it's really for all ages. But you can read it just as a fun fantasy adventure. Or you can really read it on a much deeper, more profound level, because it really talks about even the nature of reality. What is life? What is death? What is existence? It's so much in the eye of the beholder. So there's a lot in there if you care to look. And a lot of it is based on things I've learned and experienced.
Right. So let's talk about how did your travels, you say you studied martial arts in Japan. That's pretty impressive, I must say. How did your travels affect your books? Is Rupert traveling to the same countries that you visited?
Well, he does travel to many of them. In fact, book 1 takes place in his homeland, but book 2, it makes a journey from, let's say, medieval Europe all the way to India. I call it Rajasharan, but it's a surrogate for India. Book 3 takes place in Rajasharan. Book 4 takes place mainly in Africa. And part of book 5, and then it goes back to Southern Europe. And book 6 is mostly in a stand-in for Spain and his own home country. So there's so much traveling involved. And what part of that is, yes, I've done extensive traveling myself. I love to travel. I lived abroad for 20 years in Japan, but I've traveled all over the world. And what always struck me as when you cross a border, suddenly everything changed. I remember my first trip at 19 going from France to Spain, and just everything was different. The language, the customs, the food, what's played in one place is out, not acceptable in this place. And so it struck me how much is just what is right, what is wrong, what is real, what is not, is a matter of custom and tradition. And what reality is, you have to put quotes around reality, because in Japan, for example, it was so different from what's right and what's wrong in America. Completely different. And it's not as better or worse, it's just completely different. And I love that. And I felt very at home there because I was an outsider. No one expected me to be like everyone else. Whereas in America, I was supposed to fit in. So I found it very liberating to be an outsider living in Japan. And it gave me a lot of freedom. And Root comes to this conclusion eventually himself, because some places he's lauded as a great hero, and lifesaver others he's a villain and terrifying, and so on. So he realizes all of us true, none of us true. It doesn't matter. He's free to be who he is. And that's a big breakthrough for him. And I think I've had similar conclusions, through my travel, and I put it into my writing.
Yeah, just as an aside, have you ever been to the Middle East?
I have been. I've been to Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, and Egypt twice. I love Egypt.
Yeah. And
spent several months in Egypt. And unfortunately, that's as far as I've gotten in the Middle East. I'd love to go back. But it's a long story, but I remembered one of my past lives in ancient Egypt while I was there. And that was really an extraordinary experience. It changed my life completely. And if I had time, I'd tell you all the details of how that occurred, but we don't. But yeah, that was profound. It was, and I've told it to a few people, and some people think, wow, isn't that wonderful? And others think, oh no, that's impossible. It must be crazy. And I get a lot of response as a psychic. I've been chatting pleasantly with someone, like sitting next to me on the airplane, and we'll talk for an hour or more. Everything's very nice. And suddenly you'll get around to saying, oh, and what do you do? And instead of saying I'm a writer, I deliberately say, oh, I'm a psychic, and cut it, not exchanging another word. And other times when I say it, people are so interested and have a million questions and so on. So it's just how it strikes them. And everyone's allowed to have their own reaction.
Yeah, it's what I don't really like is that we don't really understand these kinds of powers, and I don't like the turning the person into like a carnival act by asking them all these silly questions that they can't answer, and so I'm more interested in it from just the human side of it and the side of, wow, how much potential do we have as human beings. So our friend Rupert, your star, is he's a remote viewer. Where did that come in?
Well, it just seemed part of his psychic abilities because he has very strong intuition. He feels guided, and he's often drawn to go to some place where he has no idea why he's going there or what's the purpose. He finds out when he gets there, but he follows these intuitions, and these are experiences I've had many times. But the remote viewing, I've heard about it as we're discussing, and I don't call myself a remote viewer by any means, but I thought Rupert would be. I'm not, but he would be. And he's often able to catch glimpses of what's going on in a certain place. And that's very helpful to him and his friends because they can avoid danger or head to danger if necessary, or whatever. But he knows often, not always, but often knows what he's walking into. And so, for example, he's in the last book, there will be a book 7 eventually, by the way, but he gets a message. He needs to go to this remote place. He has no idea why. Then he learns there's an old falling down castle there. And he realizes someone might be there that he needs to get a hold of. And he gets a vision, like a remote viewing, of how to get in there by a secret entrance. And so that's, very helpful to him. And there are a number of episodes like that. But I know remote viewing exists. So, and Rupert's extraordinary. So I thought, why shouldn't Rupert be able to do it? And it worked out very well for him in most cases. But he has many abilities too.
Well, I'm just going to caution you right now that if you get around remote viewers, don't say that. Just say that he has an ability to see things, because they're going to say that he's not following the remote viewing protocol, of which they all have. So you'll be best off by saying that he has psychic abilities, and then you and I and the readers know that he's actually remote viewing. And
for me, there's no protocols. There's no such thing as protocol. If something comes to you, it comes to you.
Yeah.
You don't have to sit down and make a ritual of it, And when you're talking about human potential, I used to think, okay, everyone has psychic abilities. They're just not using it necessarily. But over the years, I've changed my thinking on that, just because I've connected with people doing readings who have zero psychic ability. And I think it's like any other ability, like musical ability, athletic, mathematical ability. There are math geniuses in my family, and I sure don't have that. So I think everyone has a variety of gifts, and the gift you have might be very developed, or you might have a touch of it or whatever. And I think psychic ability is like any other ability. You have it, you don't. Some have it a lot, some have it to a smaller extent, and that's fine. I like to take the spookiness out of it. If you said someone really has a lot of musical talent, inborn musical talent, you say, oh, great, wonderful. Or they're great at math, terrific. They have psychic abilities, oh no, they're possessed by demons, or they're crazy, or it's impossible. So that's the thing I want to get away from. It's just a talent to me. it just feels very normal and natural.
Right. And you have the ability to turn it off and on. I want to ask you, as you're writing this book, can you, I mean, you had to make certain decisions as to what to leave in, what to leave out, how to approach an agent, or how to go about publishing the book. Did you consult any of your psychic powers on those questions?
No. If I was looking if I was looking for to publish it, and I decided I want to self-publish it because I wanted control over it, and I want to say I'm on the cover, closing is written, so on. So it was just a decision, what felt right to me. You know, I didn't have to consult an oracle to do that. As far as what I should leave in the book or take out, that's never been an issue. I've never taken anything out of the book. I might cut a sentence or something, or this word is too wordy, I can make this paragraph a little shorter. That's even rare. The editing I do is just trimming little things. I never change the story. I never really cut anything out. It just comes to me as a whole, and then it's just putting the icing on the cake, so to speak, to the editing process.
All right. So when it came to you as a whole, it came to you as in the first book as a whole, or do you know where this? Because you're already on book 7. So do you know where this is going to go, or you're just following something that just keeps coming to you?
I'm basically following something that just keeps coming. I just want to correct you with one thing. Right now, I'm not writing book 7. I'm taking a little break from that and working on book 1 of a spin-off series called the Lyra Chronicles. And Lyra is a very important person in the entire Boy with Golden Eyes. And she's in large part inspired by Sam's younger sister, Lucy. So, because she's really very intelligent and very clear-headed and very confident and lovely too. And so her character, Lucy, inspires Lyra the way Sam inspired Rupert. So, and her story is very different. It's not a fantasy, it's a fiction, but it's much more political intrigue and that sort of thing. Because she herself, her character isn't especially psychic. So she's not having all these weird experiences and being guided like Rupert was. So she has totally her own thing going on in a different country. So,
and this is another young adult?
Yeah, I guess if you have to categorize, it would be young adult. But I think of it as for everyone, like The Boy with Golden Eyes. Readers of all ages enjoy it. So I don't like to put things in categories. But when you publish, they ask you to pick a category, so I did. And
yeah, well, it's just that time of your life when you're right before girls are starting to be important and you start driving. You kind of got the world figured out. And that seems to be the highlight of your book reading, because the books you read after that, it seems like, and you go through high school and college, and then you have to start reading books, and until a long time later you start reading on your own. So I just like to, anybody who writes for young adults, I really applaud that, and I really like people that look for that audience and write for that audience. All right, so we wrote the first book. You wrote the first book,
right? And
then you say you didn't know there would be a second book. So how did the second book come about?
Well, I thought it would all be one story. I didn't even know when I began if it was just going to be a short story. Wasn't even thinking of writing a novel. I thought this would be a story. It just kept going and going and going. And then when I was writing book 1, they were trying to escape their homeland, and they crossed the border. And I thought, oh my God, there's so much story left to go, I guess. And this book can't be 10,000 pages long. So I guess it's going to be a series. And so I finished book 1 at that chapter, at that moment, which is a very important moment. And then I just continued the story. Each book continues right where the other one left off. There's not a pause in time or anything. It's just literally the next moment, basically. So, but each book, in a way, is self-contained because it's about some very specific plot development that occurs. So, and more new characters keep getting added into the story and joining Rupert's circle, and his abilities are developing. And he goes from a child to, a young adult. Well, he's like 16 at the end, but he goes from 10 to 16. So he's matured a lot and gone through a lot of the difficulties that maturing entails. He's not immune to any of that, the overwrought emotions and blindness, selfishness, but as well as being a magnificent character. So, and also he ends up with a lot of power, autonomy, and how does someone handle it, especially someone so young? It has to be, no matter how wise or well-intentioned you are, it has to have an effect on you and your friends.
So Rupert's I guess what we'd say his MO, his how he sees himself, it changes as his circumstances change, because you say he goes from sometimes a feared villain and other times he's a hero. Does this happen because of him or because of his circumstances?
It's an interesting question. It's actually, I guess, a combination of both. Because, for example, in book 4, he's already become very well known as a hero, a savior. And in entering this new country, he finds their customs really anathema and ignorant and barbaric. And he doesn't want to get involved. He's just trying to get from point A to point B at this point. But he feels more and more drawn into, this is not right, this is not right. So he tries to get involved, and then he unwittingly unleashes a series of events trying to be helpful, that to the people of that country, they think, oh, the world's going to end, because he's showing all these signs or prophecies. He has no idea that this is the case. And he's trying to tell them, no, everything's fine. Don't worry about it. So those people looking at him as like, that's why the book is called The Prophet of Doom, because he's bringing doom and the end of the country, the end of the world. They're not too sure what he might be ushering in. And so it's very discombobulating, because right before that, he was the hero that everyone was just praising to the skies, So that's when he starts to have revelations that none of this is true. I'm none of these things. People are projecting on me what they will. But I'm still me. And what am I? Am I a hero, villain? Yeah, I'm all of that, I guess. But it's what he just thinks he needs to have the best intentions. His intentions have to be good. He has to try to use his abilities, his persona for good. But sometimes that will be accepted and sometimes it will be vilified. And he doesn't have control over it. So that's something that really leaves a mark on him. And he can't really pay that much attention to it. He just has to do what he has to do and hope for the best.
Okay, Marjorie, so as you're traveling, as Rupert is traveling through the different countries that he visits, the customs, are you as accurate as you can be with the customs? And
well, I take some license, and that's why I use fictional names for the countries, for example. But I know, for example, in India and some other places, people believe a lot in karma and fate, and this is destined and so on. So several of the countries he travels through, that's the absolute utter belief. Everything's destined. You can't do anything about it, which he believes in destiny because he's obviously fulfilling a preordained destiny here. But he also realizes you have a lot of wiggle room along the way. It's always your decision to go left or right or what you want to do within this framework. So he really has very passionate arguments against this kind of thing. But that's the very strong belief system of these countries, and that makes him really think about what is fated, what is not. But one example is when he's arguing with the people about it, because he's trying to get them to rise up because an invader is coming to kill off their royal family and take over. So he's trying to rouse the populace, and they're saying, well, if this is happening, maybe this is fate. And, the royal family probably is doomed, so that's the way it goes. So he's appalled. But he says something like, if you were standing in the road and an elephant was charging at you, would you say, I guess this is my fate to be trampled by an elephant? I don't think so. I think you try to get out of the road. And if the elephant still trampled you, okay, maybe you were doomed, but you try at least to get out of there. And so he's trying to get that message to the people. You might think something's fake, but you can try your best to have a good outcome. You're not just powerless pawns here. And so the belief in fate, karma, is discussed. And there's another country that believes, talk about psychic mediums, they believe the dead really should keep ruling. So, for example, like your father dies, you go to a medium and the medium will tell you what your father wants to do and you're supposed to do it. And so Rupert, again, doesn't think that's a very good idea, but he's intrigued by it because he thought, can I talk to my dead family if I do something like that? So there are beliefs like that. In the country I talked about where they think he's the prophet of doom, there are periodic volcanic eruptions and other things going on. So it's been the custom to have sacrifices, human sacrifices to avert this. And again, he's horrified. But when he tries to overturn that, it ends up with another kind of disaster. I don't want to give the story away. So you think he finally got rationality to rule. And then when that does, it has a disastrous effect because he doesn't even know what forces he's dealing with. So, but one thing he did do is unwittingly create mass panic in the populace. So they all try to flee the country. So when the disaster happens, a lot of them are saved because they fled. So it's a very convoluted kind of situation that's going on. And there's so many layers to reality that's something he's always trying to comprehend.
Marjorie, this is amazing. You are on so many different levels here, and is a mother going to want their child to read this book? Because it sounds to me like you got some geography, you got some culture, and now you're talking about some serious philosophical issues, all packed in one book. So if I was a parent, I would love to have my kid read this book. So is that what's happening out there?
Well, I know many kids reading the books, and a lot of parents read it to their younger kids. And as I said, adults read it on their own. I've talked to some schools. They invite me to come and talk about the series and so on. So I think what would be again, children could read this as, oh, this is a fun adventure, but they could get a lot more out of it too. And I've received, various fan letters, and I've even had people say they become, from a husband and wife, they decide to become vegetarian after reading the story, because I'm a vegetarian, but it's because of, not of me, of Rupert, because he's a passionate animal lover and won't permit any harm to come to animals. And he's never eaten an animal or anything. Even in the story, he and his friends are starving at several points, and he still won't do it. And it's just giving you something to think about. And one of the countries they go to, the Rajasthan/India country, there's no meat eating there. You're not allowed to harm animals. So it affects people different ways. Someone else told me their cousin was on his deathbed, actually. He was dying of cancer. And she read the closing chapter of book 1 to him aloud because she thought it was so moving and spiritual and beautiful that she wanted to read that to him as he was passing over. And I never expected any sort of thing like that to occur, but people take out of it what they will. And I think that's wonderful. So every person who reads it in a different way, I think.
Yeah, it's like that. What is it? The Voynich, I think they call it the Voynich Manuscript, because it appears this thing showed up out of nowhere, didn't it? And I want to ask you something. So you're talking about the guys are going to come and they're going to take out the royal family, right? Right. And so he develops the argument that that, yeah, this is something that is bad that's going to happen to you. Now, most people would say, well, we're just going to replace one group of thugs with another, and maybe it might be better if they're in charge. But that argument isn't there. You just come out with this analogy of an elephant running at you. And then I just want to throw this in, that my analogy is that history is like a train, and sometimes you're on the track and sometimes you're not. And you can't really help if that train hits you. So,
and sometimes you're a passenger on the train too. So you might be on the train that way or in front of the train getting mowed down.
Yeah, see, there you go. So I can't think like that. I'm not that complex, and I'm not that smart. But would you have picked that argument? I want to know where this is coming from. Is that your argument, that you've got to help out because is something bad happening to you? Is that what you would say?
Me personally?
Yeah.
Well, I think if you have the opportunity to help someone or do good or save someone, of course you should. I mean, to me, it's an obligation. I remember when I was in Sri Lanka years ago, I went to a meditation center on top of a mountain. And there was a lay Buddhist monk who was running it. And it was my first time doing something like that. And there were so many beggars in Sri Lanka at the time. And one time we'd have evening meditation, then discussion. So I asked him, there's so many beggars. Why aren't people doing anything to help? And some of the other attendees started snickering at me, like saying, these things don't matter. It's all illusion and you shouldn't worry about that. It's their karma. And I said, no, I feel responsible. They're fellow human beings. They're suffering. If I can do something to help, I should help. I don't think that's attachment. I think that's, an awake human being trying to help someone. And much to my surprise, the master agreed with me, and everyone else was shocked. And he said, it's never wrong to show compassion. There's a difference between being overly attached to something and being compassionate, because I feel like I'm responsible for every suffering person in the world in a way. Not that I can do much about it, but I don't feel like, they're over there remotely suffering. It has nothing to do with me. Of course it does.
Right. Yeah, I understand that completely. And I just to finish off that point is just that is such, I just wanted to find out where that rationale came from. Is this Marjorie saying this? Because I think that most people would say, well, as long as I'm okay, then somebody else's fate is not really important.
I don't think most people think that. I think some people think that. I don't think most people do.
Yeah, but I've also, I've been to like Nepal, I've been to Egypt, and I've been to places where people are just really poor, and it's just I hate to say this, it's an American thing, because everybody else just walks by. I mean, Europeans, British, whatever, and whatever, but it's only Americans sit there going, how we got to help these people, somebody, and so we're out shelling out all this money, whatever we can to them. And for me, it was always, well, I can get more money, they can't. And so that was always my thing. But I know exactly what you're saying.
Well, one time in China, I was walking down the street, and there was a kind of crowd looking at something. So I looked, and there was a man badly beaten up, lying in the middle of the street. And no one was doing, there was kind of standoff looking. And so I went over, and as soon as I went over to him, the whole circle formed around us, like, what you going to do this far? And I spoke a few words of Chinese, that's all. But I had a guidebook, translating words. And so I dragged an unwitting woman who was over next to me. And I was pointing to some words and saying, like, ask him. So, like, police, do you want to go to the police? No. He was terrified. And you want to go to the hospital? No. And I was trying to ask what happened. And evidently, people from his village had given him money to come to the city and buy various things and then bring them home. And he got robbed of all this money. And now he had no money even to get back home. And I didn't know what to do. And I showed the woman next to me, who I made my cohort, I took out some Chinese money. Renminbi is the equivalent of like $10, $15 or something. And I showed it to her and I did, should I give it to him? And she said, yeah. So I gave it to him. And so he could get home. And he just looked so stunned and amazed. And, was thanking me almost too much. So I ran away, actually. But the fact that maybe if I hadn't come along, no one would have helped him. It just, I don't care if that's American.
Yep.
Too American. I'll be American if that's what it is. But I think it's being human. Yeah. And there are people who show compassion and care all over the world. It's not just an American trait by any means. Yeah. So, but we should help each other if we can.
Yeah. No, I would see car wrecks in like Oman, and they would just stand around, and I would start moving towards the people, and then when they saw that I was going to do something, then they got into action. They were just going to let them sit there and die, or wait until the police came. And then I this is way off the subject, but I'll tell you this: in Egypt, my wife and I were traveling through the Sinai, and there was a bus broken down, and all these Egyptian soldiers it wasn't broken down, it was stuck in the sand. And we couldn't get past it on our bus until that thing got out of the way. And we asked them, we're waiting for the truck to come. I said, no truck. I said, get off the bus and move this. So here's just me and all these Egyptian soldiers. And I got them off the bus and and got them to push it. And they pushed it out of the way, and then they got on their way. But otherwise, they would have just sat there. But they thought it was so funny. Oh, well, this American must know something, so let's do what he's doing. So.
Well, people have showed me great kindness and sweetness along the way, And just one time in China, I was riding the train like third class, and it was cram-packed. There were no seats, and it was like a 20-hour ride or something horrible. And so everyone in the compartment was poor, for sure. I was the only foreigner, but the guy insisted I sit down. He wanted to give me a seat, and they were making like instant noodles with hot water thermos, making noodle, and they were insisting I eat with them. And then when they discovered I knew Japanese, no one knew English, but when I knew Japanese, they would write something in Chinese, and I could sort of get what they were saying. Mm-hmm. And we had great fun-filled conversations. But I told them I was a teacher in Japan, and they were trying to find out how much money I earned, which wasn't a lot. But I knew to them it would be humongous. Mm-hmm. So I didn't want to tell them how much money because they think I was a millionaire.
Yeah.
But, we got to talking about various like Japanese singers and movie stars that they knew in China and just but they were so sweet to me. They were just so nice and wanted to make me welcome as a guest. They didn't want a foreigner standing up the whole journey and so on. It was just lovely. So, but, people are, I feel like when you go somewhere with good intentions, usually that's enough, with a smile, being friendly, and no matter what country you're in or what situation you're in, usually it will work. I mean, I've run into some very dangerous and almost deadly situations too, but most of the time people will be very nice. So.
Wow. Well, Marjorie, we're going to have to sit down and chat sometime and compare our travel experiences, because I'm sure a lot of ours are very identical or similar, even though we may have gone to different countries, but we seem to have that American naivete or naivete, as they say, but it's interesting. And like you say, I was always treated very well. I've never been in not even close to being in a bad situation. So, and I've been in places. As a
female traveling alone, it can be a different story sometimes.
Yeah, that's right. Just yeah.
But mostly it's very good. But as a little child growing up in Providence, Rhode Island, I just did not fit in. And not just because I was psychic and so on. I felt claustrophobic and trapped the whole time. I felt, this is not me. This is not the world. And I just made up my mind as a little child, I was going to go travel the world. I was just going to go wander and see it as much as I could. And nothing was going to stop me. And when I got out of high school, I worked, saved money, and went. And never turned back. So it was just something I knew I was going to do. And also when I was about 13, 14, my sister took me to see my first Japanese movie, and just something connected with me. It was Seven Samurai, if you've heard of it. So very alien to, a Jewish Gulf Island. But when I saw it, I just connected with something, and I became, a huge fan of Japanese films and the culture and the history. And I knew I was going to go live there. And in my early 20s, I went and lived there. So I feel like, and it's sort of Rupert-like in that if you decide you want to do something and you visualize it, you just can do it. Nothing, if you're going to make excuses, any excuse will do. But if you're determined, nothing will stop you. So I always knew what I wanted to do. I always knew my own mind. And so I haven't really changed since childhood, really. I've had some, embellishments as I went along the way, but I've always kind of been the same person, I think. So for good or evil, but better or worse, but that's me.
Yeah. Marjorie, as I'm sitting here looking at you, I finally realized it. I'm looking at Jackie Onassis.
Yeah, the sunglasses.
Oh, my gosh. Yeah. Well, that and you have the looks for that. So, yeah.
Thank you. But
anyway, let's, I have, you can read mine, so I'm going to have to be very careful with mine.
No, I don't go around reading minds. I'm not a mind reader. I'm not a fortune teller. Plus, just to be clear, we're not doing a reading here, right? We're doing an interview, so I'm not trying to
exactly
you in any way, shape, or form. That's an invasion of your privacy, so don't fear.
Okay, so let's. We have I think we got about 10 minutes left. So let's. I want to just talk about you. Do you provide psychic services?
Yes, I'm. Psychic, clairvoyant, psychic medium. And I also do healing.
Okay. Do you want to talk about what? So is this your? I guess I'll say profession. Is that you do this regularly?
Yes. This is what I do. Excuse me. My foot fell asleep here. This is besides writing. This is what I do, and I have clients come to my house. I do phone readings for people all over the country and sometimes abroad. And there's a wonderful art and farmers market in Seattle, in my neighborhood in Ballard. And I do outdoor readings on Sundays there, which is a nice change of pace. I love doing that. And my abilities as the medium developed fairly recently, I guess 10, 12 years ago. I'm not quite sure. I had no idea I had that ability, but suddenly it just started happening. So I just went with the flow. And that's a very interesting experience to connect with people who are on the other side, so to speak. So, and I really connect with their personalities too, which isn't just so everyone's unique. When I'm doing a general reading and getting information, it's hard to describe, but I get it from something that seems very impersonal. I kind of call it the source. It's almost like a librarian giving you information, Right. So I see, hear, and feel information about my clients and many aspects of their lives. But when I connect with someone who's passed away, I'm connecting with them individually.
Okay, so look, Marjorie, you're the third person that I've had on here to use the term source. Major Dames used it yesterday. James Gilliland from the East-Eddy Ranch. You know about the East-Eddy Ranch?
No.
He died. He had a afterlife experience and met with God, who he explains is the source. Major Dames talks about the matrix is the source. It's where all information is, and that's why I've just been talking to you about your book. Is that book that you wrote? Is that something you wrote, or is that something that is comes from the source? So, or is it all just one and the same? So, the source is definitely. I think we can say it's God. It's a reality, and it depends on your.
For me, I just want to interrupt. For me, and I don't like to use the word God just because it means different things to different people, and they categorize it according to their own beliefs. I've had a few experiences in my life, few and far between, but absolutely unforgettable, where I feel I connected with. I just call it like that. You might call it God or whatever. There's no name for it. In fact, if you've ever read the Tao, it says the way that can be named is not the way. So you can't categorize it. But the source I'm talking about when I'm doing readings, it's not the same thing at all. It's much more, I don't know, just a source of knowledge, but it's not some profound spiritual power or something like that. It's almost like having access to a library. That's how I define it. But I don't know how all this works. I've been doing it for years. I don't know. I just, like, if you're a musician and get inspiration for a song, for example, where's the inspiration coming from? You don't know exactly. Or you're a mathematician, you make the breakthrough. It's coming from somewhere within you, from outside, but it's coming from somewhere, so you just go with it. And that's how it is with me. I think Einstein said, any conclusion reached by exclusively logical means is worthless. So, because he used so much inspiration in his huge breakthroughs. So,
yeah, and you get it too, right? You just say, well, I don't even know. How did I know that? Where did that come from? Is that the story behind your books?
Yes, in a large way. I mean, as I said, it's shaped by a lot of my own experiences and so on. But it's sort of exclusive unto itself, or existence unto itself, and comes through me, and I write it down. But I know it's influenced by my own thoughts, feelings, by Sam, by Lucy, by other people I know. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when I'm doing a reading, I say something and I'm giving the information, but part of me is saying, how could you know that? Really, it's strange. Like, I remember one time I was doing a reading for a woman and I started to ask about her mother. I said, how's your mother? She said, okay, I think. And I said, I think your mother needs to go to a doctor today. She said, why? And I said, she has, and because I was hearing the information, she has cardiomyopathy. I heard it exactly that way, like, to make sure I could understand it. Cardiomyopathy. And she has to go to a doctor immediately and get fluids. And so her mother didn't like going to the doctors, but she was kind of interested in psychics. So she told her, my psychic said you go to the doctor. So she took her to the doctor, and the doctor immediately sent her to the hospital. And she had cardiomyopathy, and fluid had to be drained from her lungs, like quarts of fluid. And the doctor said, had she not gone in that day, she might have died in her sleep that night.
Wow.
And while I was telling her all this, I was thinking, this sounds crazy. How can I know this? So even part of me is saying, what? And then I didn't hear from my client for about 10 days. So I didn't know what happened. I thought maybe her mom went to the doctor and the doctor said, you're fine, or whatever. But she called me about 10 days later and told me what happened, was thanking me. But I didn't do it. I just got the information and passed it through. So I feel very detached by what comes through me, as I'm detached by the books. And sometimes people compliment me on it and say it's wonderful. And I don't think, oh, I'm a good writer. I just, well, there it was, it just is there for you to appreciate or not. And so I'm thrilled if people like it. Yet at the same time, I don't feel I can really 100% claim credit, if that makes sense.
No, I'm probably the only person you're going to talk to. It makes sense too. Absolutely makes sense. Because it's just there. Like, while we were talking about my Deceptions book, it was just there. I just grabbed it out of the ether. I mean, the information is there. It was just, and the organization and all that was just something that came out of the ether. I didn't do it.
Yeah, I wonder if every piece of music is sort of pre-existing, just waiting for someone to channel it. Who knows?
Yeah. So this is a great, we can get Ed Dames here and we can get people from the remote viewing institutes, and we can just have a heyday talking about this stuff. But I do think that our science is catching up to it. And I do think that, in the old days, you would have been burned as a witch. I might have even turned you in.
Definitely. I've even been approached by some people at the Sunday market saying you're in league with Satan and you're going to burn in hell and you're a liar and deceiver. And that's their truth, so that's okay.
Yeah, but fortunately, we're getting away from that, and our physics is catching up to explaining how some of the stuff works.
The scientists I've worked with are mostly physicists, or were mostly physicists, so they were very interested. Unfortunately, they had their sort of preconceived notion of how this worked, which I found a little disillusioning. I thought they'd be a little more open-minded and just see what happened, but they had their own theories they were trying to prove. So I thought, is that how science worked? I thought it's supposed to be the other way around. Don't have a theory, just see what happens, and then create a theory too.
So I'm interested very quickly, or not quickly, however you want to answer it. What do they think is happening?
When they tested me, I wasn't doing readings at that point. I was doing healings, but things would move, and I could affect metal and make a clock tick backwards and all kinds of things. So they tested me in various ways, which I won't go into, but they said when they asked me to set energy, the magnetic field around me changes and shifts. So my own magnetic energy, if that's the right word, is affecting my surroundings. And that was one clear thing they found out. Sometimes even gravity was affected. And another thing was light. I'd be in a blacked out room where light could not penetrate, and they'd ask me to send energy, and balls of light would be created because they were filming this. So they have a million theories. And to me personally, I don't care. I mean, I don't care what the theory is specifically, but I was glad that my energies could be recorded scientifically and they can see something's there. And when they ask me to send energy, certain phenomena manifest.
Yeah.
But as to what it all means, that's up to them to try to fiddle with. It's just a tool I use for it comes through. So.
You know what I think that because they're all pigeonholed into certain disciplines, you're looking at what you're doing is you're basically a dynamo, right? You're emitting all this electricity. Electricity affects the fields around you. Electricity affects gravity. And this is all, like I say, this is all stuff that we're figuring out now, but you are obviously a supercharged being. Have you no UFO abductions or anything?
No,
like
I saw a UFO in Tibet in a couple of places. No abductions. Haven't got to meet any aliens. Too bad.
Okay.
I'd be terrified, but I'd be very interested.
Yeah, I would think they'd be after you.
No, I'm sure what they can do is a lot more advanced than whatever I could do. So,
well, maybe you can do what they can do. So,
who knows?
Yeah.
But I also did testing at University of Tokyo Medical Center, and they had me send energy to comatose patients, that while measuring their brain waves and so on. And they saw I was able to help them, heal them in some cases. Brought a man out of a coma who had been in a coma for weeks after hitting his head. And the doctors were kind of resentful because they didn't even want to do these tests, but the head of the hospital heard about me. And so they had a very cynical attitude. And, they thought it was a big waste of their time. I thought, why did they call me in? I didn't ask to come. But I was able to prove that something was happening. So after that, they became rather intrigued by it. So it's just interesting to broaden the horizons a little bit, and because I don't feel I have anything to prove. If you don't believe in what I can do, that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, but the world is just so much more than we know.
Exactly. Or as they said in Shakespeare, there's more to the world or heaven and earth than is in your philosophy.
Heaven and earth than I dreamt of in your philosophy, for sure.
Yep. All right. Well, without digging up that old Shakespeare quote, I think, Marjorie, I need to talk to you for a long time. Maybe I'm going to have you just back to talk about your psychic stuff, because that is so, I find that so interesting. So when you get your book out or whatever, we're going to bring you back, or we'll just find another excuse to bring you back on. But before you go, I want you to, what do you do for people, and how do they contact you, and what can you help them with?
Well, do you want me to give my email address?
Yeah, give anything so they can contact you and you can do your thing.
My email address, my regular email address is Psychic Margie, PSYCHIC MARGIE @Juno, JUNO.com. It's what I do for people. It's a very unique experience. It depends on what they need, what the information I'm given, especially on a first reading, I feel that's what they most need to focus on. But it can cover their physical health. It can cover things that are going on in their life now with relationships, with careers. It can cover past lives, people they know, past state can come through. It's just very unpredictable. It's unique with every person. So, but I just got an email this morning before we started this broadcast from a woman I just did a fairly brief reading for at the Sunday market this week. And she was saying how I really brought so much clarity into this situation she was facing. And she was so grateful and she wants to come for another reading. So, I mean, that just satisfies me so much that I can help people because that's what I want to do. Because whatever talents we have, whether it's musical or athletic or in my case, psychic, it's not for us alone. It comes from God or the universe or whatever you think. And it has to flow through us and go out into the world and touch other people and inspire them or help them or touch them. And that's what it's for. It's not just for us to hoard. So sometimes I tell my clients, if you had a beautiful singing voice and all you did is hum in the shower, you're not fulfilling the purpose. So you have to find what your purpose is and share it with other people, whether it's baking the world's best cookies or helping animals or finding a cure for cancer, whatever it is. That's what we need to do, or else we're never really going to be happy or fulfilled. And sometimes we don't even know why, what's wrong, what's off here, why aren't I more happy? It's because consciously or not, we're stifling ourselves. And we have to let our talents, our energies, our hopes and dreams flow and see where it takes us.
Wow. Oh boy. Yes, exactly. I am just completely in awe. And I don't want to say anything because I'm just going to ruin what you've said. So everybody, this is Marjorie Young, and her book website is theboywithgoldeneyes.com. And Marjorie,
it's available on Amazon and so on too.
Yeah, and you can get it on my website, Books in Hindsight. I have the affiliate links. And Marjorie, say your email address one more time if you want to do a psychic reading. Psychic Margie,
PSYCHIC MARGIE @Juno, JUNO.com. Or you can also contact me through the website's address too, which is boywithgoldeneyes.com. Oh, boywithgoldeneyes @gmail.com.
And I'll have all of that stuff on the comments of the YouTube video, and I will have all of your links and everything on Books in Hindsight. So
I would love to talk to you again. I'd be delighted. That would be a lot of fun.
We'll talk after I finish here. But this has been, I thought this was just going to be a talking about your books, and you've really opened up a whole door, and you're such an interesting person. So definitely, we have to have you back. And just from what you've told me about these books, they're so fantastic on so many levels. And so I've got to check it out. I think you've got cult classics here. So
I hope you do read them. And there's been movie interest and so on. So we'll see if anything happens on that level. We'll see. But fingers crossed.
Okay, so everybody out there, thanks for tuning in today. If you're watching on YouTube, you can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play, and iTunes, and vice versa. You can also watch this on YouTube, where you can see how lovely our Jackie Onassis lookalike is. And I recommend that you do that. So everybody out there, please, especially all you kids, keep on reading.
This has been Books in Hindsight with your host, Matthew Hines. Please join us for our next podcast and look for our archives on iTunes and go to theheinessight.com. That's HEINES site.com for great books by Matthew Hines and other great authors.